Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Adam Dorsey, a psychologist in Silicon Valley and the host of SuperPsyched, a podcast dedicated to supercharging your life. Each episode contains fun, high-quality interviews with experts looking at psychology from all angles. SuperPsyched is your tool to get more of what you want in your life and less of what you don't. I'm going to take a guess that most of us, pretty much all of us, would love to be hugely successful in our chosen fields. Unfortunately, there was no class on success in school. In fact, if anything, we learned how to be good enough, but generally not exceptional. And if such a class existed, we would have learned what my guest has studied at the deepest and highest levels. Dr. Ruth Gotian wrote a book I wish I'd read decades ago called The Success Factor: Developing the Mindset and Skillset for Peak Business Performance. I loved this book, and I'm not alone. Countless thought leaders you most likely know and love have praised her book, including SuperPsyched guest and Duke Business School professor Dorie Clark, who said, Ruth Gotian has reverse engineered the path to success based on her research with extreme high achievers and offers useful tools and strategies which will give you a giant leap forward on your own path to greatness. Beautifully stated, Dorie. So listen in as Ruth unpacks the science of success and what it takes to achieve at the highest levels. Dr. Ruth Gotian, a hearty welcome to SuperPsyched.
Hello. So good to be here with you.
I'm delighted, and I'm so interested in your topic, that extra of not just getting a 90% A, but why not get 95, or as you propose, 100%, because that 5% with compounded interest over time may pay off. What I'm wondering is, first, before we even get into the topic of success as you've studied it, why did you get into this? What's the backstory?
How did my obsession with success start?
Yeah.
I've always wondered about it. I always wondered about those who have it, those who don't. How do certain people make it to the C-suite in the Fortune 500 companies and others don't? How do some people get to Broadway, the center stage, and others don't? And I've always been curious about it. And then at the age of 43, I said, all right, I could be curious or I could figure it out. So I went back to school to get my doctorate, have been studying it and researching it. And I decided to study success over different industries. So sports and science. And here we are. Wrote a book about it called The Success Factor.
A book which I loved so much that I actually listened to it twice on audio. And Sigmund Freud once said that our careers actually begin at 43. So
I think I agree with Dr. Freud.
I agree with Dr. Freud too, who also said love and work really comprise the vast majority of the joy that we receive from life, or perhaps the misery. My career also began at 43. I became licensed as a psychologist at 43. So that's very cool that you and I have that kind of synchronicity. Let's hear the myths and some of the truths as you've come to learn it about success after having spent so much time reading, studying, as well as interviewing the greats like Apollo Ono and people like Dr. Fauci. I mean, you really went deep.
I did.
With great joy, I'm sure.
I did. It's the coolest job, right?
It's the coolest job.
I get to interview astronauts and Nobel Prize winners and Olympic and NBA champions just to really dig deep and get into their heads. And I very quickly realized that it doesn't matter if you went to space or you're in the NFL Hall of Fame. It's the same for elements of success. It's not about habits, it's about mindsets. But I also realized, and this is perhaps what's most important, is that success can be learned. Now, like you, I have a bunch of degrees. I paid a hell of a lot of money in tuition, but I never had a class on how to succeed. So this work and the book, The Success Factor, is all about, this is that class I always wanted and never had, about how to succeed and how to improve what our achievements look like so that we can identify and go after them with success.
So what are some of the myths that you've heard over the years? And let's go on the opposite side, the truths.
Sure. So how often have you heard of wake up at 5 a.m.?
A million.
Right? Or read all day or make your bed before you do anything else. Well, that's just not a reality for those of us who have long commutes, who have young children that we need to get off to school and feed 3 times a day, let alone ourselves, right? It's just not a reality. And copying other people's habits is just not something you're going to do because you're not that person. If you're a night owl who does their best work in the still of the night, you're not going to wake up at 5 a.m. and be productive. So it's not about copying what others do. It's really going the step beyond that and understanding their mindset and emulating that. So it's, for example, it's not that waking up at 5 a.m. that makes you successful. It's figuring out your peak performance hours and leveraging those hours. That's the difference.
I love that so much. And I remember learning that Miles Davis turned his back to the audience. And I remember a musician spectacularly, erroneously concluding, well, all I need to do now is turn my back to the audience and I'll be like Miles Davis. Yeah. Oh, yeah, sure. That's exactly a copy paste. No, the only reason Miles Davis can turn his back to the audience is because he's Miles Davis.
He earned that.
What's that?
He earned that.
He earned that. Yeah, that is definitely not something a mere muggle can do. I've often even thought about Picasso and his just breaking all the rules, but he studied the basics first. He learned how to draw a hand.
Yeah.
Exceedingly well. I don't know if you've ever seen his basic drawings, but they're gorgeous. Right. They're perfect. And that's a very hard thing to do, is to draw a hand. And then he broke all of the rules. Yeah. But he had to learn the good stuff, the basics first. And so did Miles, for that matter. So that person who suggested turning the back to the audience, well, that was earned. And he only got to do that because he was Miles Davis. Nobody else could.
Yeah. And you brought up a great point. That's one of the elements of success, is really doubling down on the foundations. So it doesn't matter how good or how successful or how many awards you've won, you're still going to do those foundations first. That's why Kobe Bryant would wake up early and do those layups, those same layups you see in any junior high gym. There's no difference, right? He may have better sneakers, right? And better equipment, but the exercises are exactly the same. Because if you can do those well, then you can build a house on that foundation. And that's why the athletes are still doing those basic warm-ups, those basic drills. The scientists are still designing their own experiments. You never rest on your laurels.
And sometimes you'll meet a hubristic individual who will say, I don't believe in the basics. I'm a healer and I heal. I'm not going to learn the basics of healing. I transcend them. Well, not a great idea. As a therapist myself, the basics matter. If we want to stand on the shoulders of giants, we have to learn the basics, because that is the shoulders of the giants.
That's right.
I said, good. How do we separate the wheat from the chaff, though? How do we figure out what are the basic exercises that we replicate, like the layup?
You have to figure out what are those skills that make you so good. And it's also learning from other people's successes, but it's also, perhaps more importantly, is learning from the failures, because the failures are data. And you can learn from that. So whatever it is in your field, in your industry that makes you exceptional, you need to do that so well that you work on it so that it's muscle memory. Now, if you ask any pilot and any astronaut, the takeoff and the return are the 2 most crucial times of the space flight. So much so that they rehearse it over and over and over again, including every possible error and tragedy that could occur and every emergency, so that they know how to deal with it without even thinking about it. That's what you want to be able to get to. Later on, they get to space, they have more time to work things out and think things through. But you want to be able to do things so well that it becomes muscle memory. And you always want to keep working at it. It's like warming up before you go to the gym, right? Before you start your exercises. It's the same exact idea.
So much of being outstanding really is tantamount to doing the boring things in rinsing and repeating. I just had the pleasure of hearing Ed.D. Lee talk about his book, and he's the lead singer, bassist from Rush. And he described the fact that his drummer, Neil Peart, whose memory is he's now of blessed memory. He is widely considered the greatest drummer of all time. And he would show up before performance, about 30 minutes before. That was part of his method. And he would warm up for 30 minutes before a 3-hour show every time. And what you're speaking to is that's the difference maker. And you have basically identified through your hard-earned research 4 basic qualities, characteristics, traits of a highly successful performer. Well, are you comfortable revealing what those are?
Sure. So the 4 elements of success, the first one is they tapped into their intrinsic motivation, right? This is what they were put on this earth to do. It's the reason they wake up in the morning. It's the reason they can't quiet their mind at night. This is what they love doing. They can't not do it. And they focus their whole lives on doing it well, right? So that's the first part. That's what's so exciting. Now, this is very different from extrinsic motivation, where we do things for awards, rewards, promotions, bonuses, Olympic medals, Nobel Prizes, right? I don't know of a single Olympian or a single scientist who started out their career saying, my goal is to get the Nobel Prize, right? Their goal is to get through the practice. That's the first thing. So it's find out what it is that you love to do. You love doing it so much you can't not do it. That's intrinsic motivation, tapping into your passion. That's the first one. The second thing is actually where you are outworking and it's your resilience, it's your grit, it's all of that. But really, it's how you approach challenges. That's the most important. And all the high achievers, they never question if they will overcome a challenge. Instead, they focus on how to overcome that challenge. And they think to themselves, what is that strategy that I haven't thought of yet? And the second they're able to do that, they are now in the driver's seat and they can control what they can control. And all those things they can't control, they just let it glide off of them. That's the second. The third one is what we spoke about earlier, the strong foundation, not resting on your laurels, making sure that your foundations are so good and so strong that you can rely on muscle memory in an emergency. That's what you want to do. And then the last one, and this was the one that surprised me the most, is that continuous learning, that lifelong learning. Now, you and I, we went back to school. We got degrees later in life. You don't have to go to school for continuous learning. It's not about the reading 8 hours a day. You've heard it, the Mark Cuban, the Bill Gates, the Warren Buffett, they read for many hours a day. That's not what made them billionaires. What made them so successful is that they open their minds up to new knowledge. And by hearing all this new knowledge from all these different industries, they were able to make connections between 2 points that other people don't yet see. And that is what is so critical. So it's opening your mind up to new knowledge, figuring out the different ways you can learn. You can go to school, you can get a degree, you can take online classes, you can listen to podcasts such as this one. Hopefully we're sharing good stuff here. I mean, endless opportunities to learn new things. And one of the ways to learn new things is to surround yourself with a team of mentors, people who believe in you more than you believe in yourself. And that was fascinating for me to see that even people at the top of their game were still seeking out new ways to learn new things. Those are the 4 elements of success.
And what I love about them is they are, and you are very clear about this idea, is that this is an individualized formula for everyone. And my formula relates that all of these things are there, the intrinsic notion, the grit, the foundational components, and the commitment to continuing learning. One of the things that I do is I think about Lee Trevino, a great golfer, used to say, I don't play golf myself, but he said, if the sun is out, I'm hitting golf balls. And I love that line. And for me, my version of golf balls are, and I have no financial association with this product or company, is I carry AirPods everywhere I go. I have many, many sets of AirPods, arguably too many. But the reason I have them is because of my commitment to continuing to learn. Because if I'm not in session, if I'm not doing a podcast, if I'm not in conversation with somebody, I'm probably listening to a book like yours to improve my game. And I'm highly dyslexic. So reading 8 hours a day would be more like a neurotypical person reading for an hour and a half. I read very, very slowly. So if I exclusively relied on my capacity to read, there would be a very small ROI associated with that. But now that I live in an era where I can listen and my learning style is well equipped to listen, this works for me.
How great is that?
So great. And it dovetails perfectly with the success factor that you've written about. And I'm so grateful for that.
My dad, he always said to me, bring reading material with you. Wherever you go, you bring reading material with you. I said, why? He said, because then when there's a wait for something, you don't mind because you're reading. And I'm a voracious reader and I read in different modalities. So I always have in my car, I always have a print book, which I'm reading. In my purse, I have a Kindle. So if I'm online at Costco and that line could be half an hour, I just whip out my Kindle and I start reading. And if I'm sitting in traffic, I have my Audible that I'm listening to in books or a podcast or whatever it is. So I listen or read in different ways. And I also have a team of mentors. But this is how you always grow and how you're always able to just connect ideas. And it's so critical.
So I'd like you to weigh in on the conversation of disabusing the listener around the idea of the self-made individual. Even Arnold Schwarzenegger really has spent a lot of time saying, I did not do this alone.
Yeah.
And I love that. You're talking about mentorship. And for me, mentorship has really been a huge key in my own success, whether it's been professional mentorship, academic mentorship, or just kind of life mentorship. Can you describe what a mentor can do and what a person should look for? Obviously, I think you even say in your book, don't just say, hey, be my mentor. Yeah, right.
That's the worst thing to say. That's the worst thing to say, because when you say that, you're actually asking someone to take on another obligation.
Make me
nobody has time, right? And so I say that's a title that is earned. You need to earn somebody's time and they need to earn the respect of that title. The mentors are able to open doors that you did not even know existed. And that is huge, right? How can you reach for the next level if you don't even know what that next level is? And they can tell you what are the bumps in the road that you might face, what are the people who might get in your way, who are the people who will have your back, what are some opportunities that you should throw your hat in the ring for. Tell the story in the book of Nicole Stott, who's also featured in my next book on mentoring. And she shares the story. She was an engineer, a pilot and an engineer. And she worked at NASA, but as an engineer, right? Not everyone who works at NASA is an astronaut. And then one day she said, astronauts do a lot of the things that I do here on Earth. And it was her mentor who said, fill out the application, right? Fill out the application. And sometimes we need that push. And that's what it's all about. And I think having a team of mentors who can give you different perspectives and come from different fields is so critical.
Can you describe some of your own relationships with mentors and what they've done for you?
One of my mentors, there were 6 words that changed my life. When I told him that I wanted to go back to school and I told him I wanted to study success, his name is Dr. Bert Shapiro. He was the head of all MD PhD programs at the National Institutes of Health. And I was going to compare one class to another and figure out what made people successful. And he said to me, you're looking at this problem from a lens that no one else has looked at it. He said, do something important, not just interesting. 6 words. And that took my research from a singular institutional study to an international study, which crossed disciplines. That changed everything. And it's fascinating when I got to interview Dr. Fauci. I said, there's so many infectious diseases in the world at any one time. How do you know what to focus on? And he said, I do what's important, not just interesting. Something that will have a ripple effect that could save millions of lives of people I will never have the opportunity to meet. That's to do something important, not just interesting. Those are the 6 words that allow me and allow every person, I think, to work within their zone of genius in the way that they can create a ripple effect and leave this world better than they found it. And that's what Dr. Shapiro did for me. And Dr. Marie Volpe, who was my doctoral dissertation advisor and later became a good friend and a mentor, who looked over everything that I wrote and pushed me harder and said, go deeper. She read over the book proposal, or the lawyers who looked over my contracts and said, ask for more, do more. So there's so much different varying threads of advice and guidance and support that I got from my mentors. And I think it's so critical.
Let's unpack those 6 words from Bert Shapiro, who basically gave you a compass.
Yeah.
Said, go this direction. And
Yeah.
so you doubled down and you went, well, actually maybe quadrupled down because you're kind of more about the 400%. But went that direction. Great success. At the age of 43, when a lot of people would think you're kind of defined by then, but you're constantly redefining yourself. I think about Dan Pink and his love of the intrinsic and the notion that when there's a big enough why, the how almost becomes irrelevant. It's like we will figure out how because the why is so important. Do what's important. And I think about Stephen Covey as well as Henry Kissinger, who both said, don't mix up the urgent for something that's actually important. Like
that's right.
A lot of us spend too much time putting out fires, erroneously concluding that those are the important things. And we miss out on the important stuff by constantly putting out fires.
That's right.
I guess I would wonder, how do you, Ruth, find a way to focus on what's important rather than what can obfuscate the important and which is the urgent? Because I know you're a mom. I know you've got a lot of things. I'm guessing throughout the course of the day, you have many fires to put out.
Yeah. And I got a day job and,
Something to say, do this. Practically, how do you do that?
Yeah. So my calendar is sacred. And I have learned from these high achievers to protect my time. And I protect it like nobody's business. I am that early riser, right? That's me. And I'm the one who wakes up at 5 a.m. And I do my best work in the morning. So I make sure to do all my deep level thinking and analyzing in the morning, because what I can get done in an hour in the morning would take me all day if I did it after lunch. So I do all my active and deep focus work in the morning, and I save my passive tasks such as Zooms and emails and social media for the afternoon. And by doing that, I'm able to be significantly more productive. I also lean on my mentors a lot. I say, this is all what's on my plate right now. And they help me differentiate between what are things that only I can do versus other things that other people can do versus what needs to happen right now versus what can wait until later. And I think sometimes getting that clarity is so important. So some people say do the easy stuff first. Some people say do the hard stuff first. Some people say do the urgent stuff first. But it's really peeling the layers between what are the things that only you can do and what needs to happen first. And sometimes I work in sequence and certain things have to happen in parallel. And I also talk in the book about the Pomodoro technique, about working in sprints, which is so important, which I do all day, every day. I think that's important. I can't, as much as I love to read, I can't do analytical reading for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours at a time without being mentally exhausted.
So good. And let's talk about this. You've written a book. You got a second one in the works. You're working full time. I don't know, Cornell Medicine. Last time I checked, that's a world-class institution. I'm guessing the demand is pretty high. I mean, I think a lot of my listeners probably have a book in them. I know I'm finishing up mine, and it's a really, really hard thing to do. I'm guessing that as you were looking at your tasks throughout the day and thinking about them through the lenses of what do I need to do by myself? How do I triage this? Thinking of the power of when, like what time do I do this to make sure it gets done? I'm thinking that the book has to be done first thing in the morning and using that Pomodoro. By the way, do you do 22 or 28 minutes? How many minutes do you do on your Pomodoro?
I do 25.
You do 25?
Or actually, I do off 35.
35 minutes, yeah.
I do the cycle of a washing machine. I put the clothes in the wash, run up, I do my sprint, I finish my writing sprint, the wash is done. It gives me time to put in the dryer, next sprint.
I have never heard of a 35-minute Pomodoro. The reason that you've come up with is entirely personal. It sounds like you also handle many of the laundry duties in your house. So that dovetails nicely with that.
Well, I think it's because I have a longer on-ramp. So it takes me a while to warm up.
Oh, God.
So I need a little bit more time. 25 minutes is not enough for me. 35 minutes is a sweet spot. And that's why I do it that way. The Success Factor was actually written on weekend mornings. And it was done during the throes of COVID. So during the week, I was at work. And on the weekends in the morning, I did my deep focus work, writing. I had a goal for myself of how many words I would write on each day. So I gave myself the goal for Saturday, the goal for Sunday, and the goal for the following Saturday and Sunday. And then I gave myself the third week to review and edit what I wrote. And I stuck to it.
May I ask the number?
I don't remember what it was. It was a while ago. Basically, I took the number of words that I was contracted to write, divided by the number of chapters in the book. And then I cut that into 4. So then I had 2 weekends.
Are you kidding me right now?
No, I'm dead serious.
2 weekends?
2 weekends per chapter to write it.
I follow now. 2 weekends per chapter. Okay. I was thinking for the whole book. Okay.
No, I think the whole book took about 9 months. Yeah, no, I can't write a whole book in 2 weeks. I'm not one of those people.
A little more relatable. Okay.
Because remember, there was so much research I was doing simultaneously with the interviews, and then I had to code them and analyze them and social scientist stuff.
Love that. And personally, when I did my case study for my doctorate, the PsyD dissertation, I remember doing it in record time in a similar way of breaking it down to bite-sized chunks. I'm a real fan of the Pomodoro method. Sounds like you're also, as you thought about your own Pomodoro number, you really thought about what does it take to context switch, get into first gear, second gear, third gear, and then finally fourth and fifth gear, so that you were actually able to maximize your 35 minutes.
Yes.
That's brilliant. And one of the things that I keep hearing is it's so personal.
Yeah.
And we have to really think about ourselves as basically the instrument.
Yeah,
Like, what
that's
does
right.
this instrument need? Some of us are SUVs, some of us are Ferraris, some of us are stick shifts, some of us are manuals, but we all need different something to make sure that we are performing at our best.
And it changes over time, right? What we need in our 20s is not what we need in our 40s. So it's important to understand that not just our needs change, our passions change as well. And our passions actually change whenever we have a change in our life. So a new job, a new house, a new partner, a new child, a pandemic. Those are all causes for us to reevaluate our passions. And that is why when COVID started, so many people left their jobs because their passions, they had this realization that they were passionate about before is not what they're passionate about now. So I think that's so critical. And if your listeners want to figure out what they're passionate about right now, they could just download from my website the passion audit to figure it out, which is a simple 3-column exercise that I put together. They could go to ruthgotian.com/passion audit.
Well, the website will certainly be in my show notes. It always is. And listeners, I definitely recommend this. One of the things that you also say, and we've been talking about, but I'm just going to say it because it's such a nice soundbite. You can't emulate habits, can emulate mindsets. That may be one of my favorite of all of the things you say in the book, because, and you're even talking about it to the sense of the seasons of our lives, that who we were at 18 and how we rocked it at 18 might be different from how we rock it in our 40s and 50s.
I certainly hope it is.
Yeah, you and I both.
Right.
So I also think about how I might do things in the summer versus how I might do them in the winter. I might be much more indoors in the winter and much more outdoors in the summer. And I know many of my clients need a loud place to be most productive. They want an active cafe to do their most productive work. And other people are more monastic and need a quiet place.
Yeah. It's a perfect peak of background noise. So there's a difference of background noise in a playground versus a coffee shop. Right. And I am one of those people who works beautifully in a coffee shop. But if there's high shrieks and whistles, I can't get any work done. But you can only do certain work with those background noises, right? You might be able to write, but not edit. So it's being hyper aware and leveraging those things that work well for you and doing that. I work with an Olympian. He recently retired and he got a bunch of medals as an Olympian. And now he's working on his next career and it's a little slower to get that on-ramp. And I said, what gives? I said, you're not afraid of hard work. I mean, you made it to the Olympics. He said, I'm not afraid of hard work. I need the right conditions. And I'm figuring out what those right conditions are.
That is so good. And one of the things that I'm feeling kind of a symmetry with you around is we are dedicated to learning throughout the rest of our lives. I'm guessing that would be the same for you. And as I work with high achievers, I learn every day. I would actually argue that I'm learning, having a software update every day, every hour I work. I'm wondering, working with these successful people as you do, what have you learned recently that has blown? It sounds like you just dropped one of them, things that you just learned, but let's hear about some of your gleanings of recent days.
So that same Olympian and an NBA champion both recently said something to me, which I can't stop thinking about. I'm a workaholic. And they both said to me, you need to take a break. And the break can't be just watching TV. It needs to be a vacation. I know I can sleep well. I don't vacation well. And they're really pushing me to try to do that. They said life is too short. They're right.
So what's your ask?
They're right.
As it relates to taking a break? Like, can you describe for me how you might design it if you were to really, really listen to your instrument that is you? What would be a really restorative break for you?
I am fixated on that picture behind you because for me, the idea of a great time, and by the way, I am a 95% extrovert, right? I've been tested. I am a social being. But to me, being near a body of water with a pile of books, to me is nirvana. That is perfection.
I love that. That will be what really restores you. Yeah.
At least in my mind.
Yeah. And you and I both know that in theory, there is something very important about taking a break from the week.
Yeah.
Perhaps every 7th year, taking a sabbatical of
some
kind, whether it's the land that you're farming or the brain that you're working. I really hope that you can get that. Is there anything that I should have asked, Ruth, but haven't yet asked?
One of the questions that I often get asked is, how did you meet NBA champions and astronauts and Nobel Prize winners, et cetera?
Not easy meets.
No, they're not easy meets, especially when I have well over 100 of them. And I could tell you that 95% was through networking. People like to work with those who they know, like, and trust.
Yep.
And developing that trust is so critical. And I explained what I'm doing because of where I work. I knew many Nobel Prize winners. That was not a problem. I realized I only needed to know one Nobel Prize winner, one astronaut, and one Olympian. And if I did a good job, they would refer me to others. And that's what happened. I made it my business to know one of each. And then it just was a domino effect. But what I'm most proud of is that so many of them have become such good friends. And it was interesting. One of them, the NBA player, is like, I know he's an NBA player. I know he's an NBA champion. But we're such good friends that you forget. I know it sounds weird, but you forget, right? Because it's just my friend. And I was at the gym one day and all of a sudden I look up and
there he is.
And I forgot. And I texted him, I said, I almost dropped my weights because I forgot. I know that sounds very strange, but that's what happened.
Makes sense.
That's what happened. So I know that a lot of people have a hard time starting conversations with people who they don't know, but I am so passionate that we can learn from other people and learn from people who are different than us. And I am not an astronaut. I am not a Nobel Prize winner. I'm not an Olympian. I'm never going to be. But I find people in general with different backgrounds so fascinating. And I wrote some of my favorite conversation starters. So for me as an extrovert, it comes as naturally as breathing. But for other people, it's a little bit harder. And I think if you have conversation starters, it makes going up to someone and starting a conversation so much easier. So I put 13 of my favorites up. Your listeners can just go there and grab it. ruthgotian.com/conversation.
Love it. Just give us one of them.
I'll give you two easy ones. First, look at what they're wearing. I have had many conversations with people over funky socks and their blue glasses or a brooch that they had on, right? Those are very easy. Another one is when I was at a conference, somebody actually approached me and I was at the buffet line and they said to me, what was your favorite session? I was like, oh, that's so simple and so perfect. And I said, oh, I really liked such and such. They said, well, why did you like such and such? And then we got into it. And then I learned all about her life. She was an officer in the Army. I know nothing about being an officer, a female officer in the Army. And we got into this whole conversation and it was just brilliant. I loved it.
And one of the things I love about the way you rock this strength set that you have is that curiosity appears to be at the nucleus, at least one of the key components. That's the nucleus of everything you do.
Yeah, absolutely. The more curious you are, the more you learn.
I could not agree more. And it seems to be that there's a chasm between that awareness and one's willingness to execute on that. Everyone seems to know that curiosity is important. And yet very few people are really willing to rock it hard during their dash between their birth and death date. And you've done that. And I think that's really an important component of the success factor.
You know why? I always thought that if you ask a question, you're admitting you don't know something. And that's a sign of weakness. And I think that's how many of us were raised. But the day that I figured out that saying, I don't know, it's actually a sign of strength, that's when everything changed. So now I always say, I don't know. I don't understand. This is not my zone of genius. Can you explain it to me like I'm 5, right? All these kinds of things. And all of a sudden I get a deeper understanding of things just because I'm asking questions. But by asking questions, it also gets people to clarify their message and it gets people to think about different things, that things they thought were obvious are not obvious, right? Because if I'm thinking it, other people are probably thinking it too.
Love that so much. And I don't remember who was telling me this, but one of the key debriefs between a parent and a child was, what questions have you asked today?
Yeah.
It's a really important thing to really cultivate in our children and in ourselves, and that we never stop. Danny Kahneman, according to Adam Grant's book, takes great joy in being wrong. Now, he's a Nobel laureate scientist. And when he's told that something he had thought forever and ever was untrue, he takes great pleasure because he's coming closer to the truth.
That's right.
That, in my mind, is the sign of true intelligence and true scientific genius. That dedication, and not this kind of rigid, like holding on to something that may actually be archaic.
That's right.
That's how we die. I'm going to ask you a final question, and I'm just so delighted to be speaking with you. This is so much fun, Ruth. All right, let's get into our last question. It's the magical question I ask everyone, and I want to hear your version. Ruth, if you had the magical powers to confer upon all humanity, one skill or insight that would dramatically improve the lives of individuals as well as perhaps society at large, what would that skill or insight be? And how do you imagine it would impact the individual and possibly even trickle down to society?
Oh my God, this could be a whole other podcast interview.
I know. It's a big-ass one.
I think I'm going to double down on what we were talking about before. I think it's creating hubs of curiosity in your life, but not just being curious, taking action on that curiosity. So you don't want to walk around just asking questions and doing nothing with the answers. You want to then take it to that next step, which is where most people fall short, is they'll ask questions, they'll Google things, they'll look things up on YouTube, but then they don't take action. So make sure that it's a 2-step solution.
I love that. Well, Ruth, it has been delightful. I knew it would be, and I'm so glad you stuck it out and that we got to have this interview and that my listeners get to be the beneficiaries of your hard-earned wisdom. And I just want to thank you for sharing it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
This is Dr. Adam Dorsey thanking you for listening to SuperPsyched. If you know anyone who might like it or who might benefit from listening, share it. And if you like the episode, please hit subscribe.